So the red one? Yeah, check out the red one.
Do you have your hair curled too or no? When we were playing basketball or something?
Yeah, I have my do-rag on. Yeah, my do-rag on.
So what is she know?
She just knows.
Yo,
Sammy knows a lot.
innocent, bro.
I already know about that.
Sorry, I didn't know it was targeted.
You know what he said? 16, I thought it was an age.
Because he's in the vein.
KB in the bay going crazy. Put peace on the hood, Mercedes. Young boys letting off 80. Leaning next to a Dior like Haiti. This ain't no corner, no Bailey. No internet clown gon' play me. Money ain't never gon' make me. I can win with a couple bucks like Brady. HCA baby, you cannot shame me. What they gon' pay me to shut my mouth? Ain't gotta okay me, that ain't gon' save me. I'm finna stay free on the house.
What is up, everyone? We are back with another episode of Shaping the Culture. Hope all is well with you guys. As you guys can see, I got some friends with me on the podcast. I'm just gonna have, I said podcast. I had a fun moment already.
Yo, Parker, you're ready to work, bro. Already off to a start.
Already off to the start.
Y'all gotta be in agreement.
You don't want to
I didn't hear him say amen. That's what happened.
That's what it is. Drink his water like this.
For real. I'm gonna let everybody introduce themselves. So we'll start with Yosef and we'll go all the way down.
What's up, y'all? My name is Yosef. I'm not a stranger to Shaping the Culture, but how y'all doing?
Hi, my name is Salim.
Hi, my name is Samri.
Yeah.
I want to make sure you heard me.
It is. It's definitely working. Hi, my name is Sam. Glad to be here.
Hello, my name is Parker.
Mr. Thibodeau.
Yes, sir.
Well, we're here to talk about something that's fun, exciting, engaging. We already have these conversations behind closed doors when the cameras are off, and we're like, why not press play and just have a Solomon looks a little nervous.
Like tweaking, bro.
But here, this is the reality of it all. One of the reasons we're all kind of nervous and on edge is because we're not having these conversations enough, and I think that's part of the problem. When we think about sexuality, when we think about sex drive, they're all God-given. They're gifts from God, but it's been hijacked by culture, and it's been perverted by culture, and now it's got the people of God shaking in their boots. And so one of the reasons why we actually want to have this conversation is to bring some light to it, bring some ease to it, bring the word of God on it, bring some freedom in it, and have fun, productive conversations. And so you guys have seen the title, Horny and Holy. I guess my first question for us today is that an oxymoron? Can you be horny and can you be holy at the same time? What do you guys think?
Yes, next question.
You want to break it down?
Yeah, so I think, how I would define like horny is just like, man, I just feel like I want to have sex with somebody, or I just like, I feel like a desire to like be physical with somebody or express my love in a very full and complete way. And I don't think like that's bad thing. I think I'm made that way. I think it's just a matter of like managing that and making that submit to my relationship with the Lord, because I think He made me that way on purpose. But I think it's also a practice of discipline to keep all that in check until it's the proper time to do so. But like that's a challenge. But can you be both? Like, yeah, absolutely. I think we could all attest to that. I think it's a matter of like, is it always easy? I think it's like a question that you could get into.
Well, you brought up a really good point, this idea that God made you that way. That's such a foreign concept to think God made us horny or God gave us a sex drive. How does that land on everybody in the room? Is that obvious, like, duh, God made us with a sex drive? Or is that even tough for some of you to really process and make sense of?
I think it's very healthy. The God that created marriage, the God that created a couple, Adam and Eve, of course would that would have to be factored in, you know, the healthy sex drive, the appetite for be fruitful and multiply. But for me, it's definitely healthy, and I agree with Parker. But when we say horny, what exactly do we mean? Like, do we want to break that down? Because there's an unhealthy habitual, fixation on sex or the thoughts that we have. And where do we want to, to cap that, or, where do we want to stop the thought? As people especially people that we're not able to exercise. Me as a single person, for example, before I was married. Before I was married. You good? Before I was married.
Like, y'all gotta talk about something?
That's a question for you.
When I'm single.
Used to be.
Y'all don't have sex? What's going
Yeah,
on?
Only?
You go answer that.
But yeah, go ahead.
She said something that really like hit me, like as like, so pastors, right, bringing it straight to the gospel. Whenever God like gives a command, he doesn't just command you to do something against your will. He gives you the desire to do so. I think in the Old Testament we view like the law like as something that we like have to do under compulsion, gotta force ourselves to do it. But knowing that whatever God is commanding us to do, he's given us the capacity and the strength to do it. And so even like when we talk about sex drive, it's like, man, it's God given. But you know, a lot of us, like we grew up in like this purity culture. And so the term, even like when you first asked the question, like, can you be horny and holy? It's almost like, can you be a sinner and holy? Like, you know, because like the term in my mind of horniness, it's like, oh, that's something sick. That's like wrong. You have to suppress that. Like there's something wrong with you if you're constantly desiring sex. And I remember even as a kid, you know, asking God, like, yo, I can't, like I mean, like, I'm not even joking, like praying, like, God, take this desire away from me because this is causing me to stumble. I always feel shame. I'm always feeling guilty. Remove this desire from me. And I just remember in the moment of prayer, like the Holy Spirit, like just prompting my heart, like, yo, this is something that I gave you, right? Like, so it's like this appetite, this desire in its proper context. This is meant to be beautiful. Do you really want to have this desire to be removed? Because what kind of fruitfulness will you find in your marriage? Or will you even be married? Like if I'm over here like asexual, have no desire for sex, like, you know, it's hard to stay married. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Unless you find another asexual partner. Because sexual people do desire.
A follow-up to this conversation is like, is it worth it to get married if you're not having sex?
So I can just have a best friend.
That's good.
Talk about it.
That's actually really good.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Samri wants to say something.
I think like you asked like I forgot what you asked, but like it hasn't always been healthy like to have like to me like sex wasn't always like something that I saw I was like holy, you know, because like surrounding that it was just like a lot of negative things and like a lot of guilt. And so like until I learned like it is actually like what God desires for us, you know, obviously in the context of marriage and everything. So until like you get to that idea, it's like it's always going to be unhealthy and like always like just full of guilt and stuff. I'm not saying I'm over that, but I feel like it's like it takes time to heal from that. So I just want to point like I think a lot of people are still in this like trying to see sex as like a good thing, you know? So
I think the reason why we have like both singles, married people inputting into this conversation is because like I think a lot of times we like put sex drive only in the context of marriage, but it's what gets us into marriage. You know what I mean? Like Paul is like, yo, rather than burning up with desire, get married. You know what I mean? But if we're over here, like, and I think that's the problem with our generation, like because so many people are having sex outside of marriage, there is no desire for marriage. You know what I mean? And so I think the sex drive is even healthy as a motivating force to, all right, yo, like settle down. You know what I mean? Like, yo, all right, like maybe she or he is not meeting everything that you've set out as like, oh, like she's got to have this, and this. But because of that sex drive that you have, you're like willing to,
Compromise?
man, not compromise, but really like, getting your priorities right, for real. Exactly.
Yeah. No, I love what everybody's been saying. And even the shame part Samri was talking about, that's so key. A lot of us are still in our adulthood, like mid, late 20s, early 30s, unlearning this idea that having a sex drive is healthy and it's right and it's God-given. Salim talked about the idea that we got to put some self-control on that. And just because we have that desire, that doesn't mean we're going to get to this in a second that we should just express it or like dive deep into it or anything like that. But the feeling alone is natural and it's what makes us human. And I would argue that God has made us sexual beings. And that is a part of what comes with being a sexual being. And a lot of the times growing up, we were told, don't have these feelings, don't have these feelings, like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and it makes you wonder, am I like far from God because I have these feelings? Like, is there something wrong with me because I have these feelings? But no, it shows that you were made the way you were called to be made, and there's nothing wrong with you. I'm reminded of like this funny story of, Miles Monroe gave a story of this woman that came to him. She's like, Pastor, please pray for my husband. He's got a demon. And then he's like, oh, what kind of, like, what's going on? What kind of demon is this? She's like, he wants to have sex all the time. And he's like, I'm sorry, I can't pray for your husband. Yeah, she's like, what's wrong? He's like, I have the same demon. But like, that's the thing though. It's like, yo, they gotta be demon possessed. There gotta be something wrong with them. We need to fix them because they want to have sex. But the reality of the matter is God has designed us to desire to have sex, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think what makes you horny and holy is what you do with your horniness. You add holiness to it with the way you guide those desires, not by not having those desires. And there's a difference. That kind of I want to lead to the next question. What's the difference between desiring sex and just acting upon your desire? Or is there a difference altogether?
Let me point one thing out from Horny and Holy.
Yeah. He said, hold on, we're not done with that thought yet.
I just had a thought. I think a lot of time the reason why we think the word horny is like bad or ungodly is because we think it's a byproduct of the fall. I think Adam in heaven, when he saw Eve, he had something for her. He had a feeling, a desire for her.
I took it a different way when you said he had something for her.
No, he had a desire for her,
Yeah.
So we tend to think this sex drive is ungodly because of like the fall. But we see in heaven God telling them like, yo, be fruitful and multiply.
Right.
How can you do that if there is no desire, if there is no sex drive, if there is no attraction?
My bad.
Garden of Eden, yeah.
I got confused.
Yeah, Garden of Eden.
I heard heaven. I was like,
Yeah, Garden of Eden.
we gotta switch the topic, bro.
Yeah, Garden of Eden.
All right. Got you. All right.
They're like, yeah.
I got you.
But
Just piggybacking off what you said and what Yosef said, that's one of the first commands that Adam got.
Yes.
Like, think about that. Like, one of the first commands he got wasn't go pray and fast.
Yeah.
One of the first commands wasn't go tithe your money. It was literally go have sex.
It was go get it in. Put it down.
You said put it down.
Enjoy it.
Put in the work.
You want to talk about that? You want to let
No,
it
go
out?
ahead. I just had to get that part off.
He wasn't only tending to the Garden of Eden, if you know what I'm saying.
But yeah, Sam, sorry not to interrupt, but did you have another thought with that? Like
that was just said. Like, I
command.
think we need to fix our understanding of like this wasn't because of the fall. This was there in the beginning. When we understand that, I think we'll use it in the right way. That glorifies God. Yeah.
That's good, man. That's good. Does anybody want to add to that or any other thoughts to that? Yeah.
Just like when we're talking about this, like a lot of people or like church people can be like, oh, you just gotta be holy and just like we like to put like Bible verses or something like that. But like, let's actually talk about like, let's just be real. You know what I mean? Like, let's not just put like certain like Bible words that like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Like,
Let's talk about the
and
feeling.
like, let's talk about what actually helps people. So.
Like get practical about it and not just
Yeah,
talk
not
about
just talk.
scriptures and make it.
Make it like, oh, this, it's really not that easy.
Yeah.
So.
That's good.
Yeah, that's right.
Which kind of leads to maybe the next question, I guess, is why do you think God gave us a sex drive? What's the purpose of sex? I once heard where purpose is missed, abuse is inevitable. And so maybe one of the reasons why we're having sex before marriage, one of the reasons why people feel shame around having a sex drive is because we simply don't know the purpose behind the desire, behind sex, and what God, we always talk about, oh, it's in the confines of marriage that we express our sexuality. But even that, why? Why do we have to wait till marriage to express our sexuality? If I'm a sexual person, why can't I act on my urges now? And so I know you gave a word on this, Farazim, earlier this year in February. But yeah, let's talk about that. Let's unpack the purpose so we can get practical and really like help people.
Go ahead, Bishop. You got a word. You got a word. He had a word burning. I can see it.
I don't want to get too biblical terms, you know what I mean? Something like no, I'm playing. Getting
Be
real.
biblical to be practical. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Don't like, get lost in the sauce here.
I think the reason I think you asked a lot of questions, so like I'm only gonna try to address one part, and then we can give it to them. But I think sex, it's defined in the context of marriage because sex is dangerous. I think when you're having sex with someone, you're not thinking right. When you're having sex, you're not making the best decisions. When you're having sex, it's like
Talking about single and having sex, or
Yeah.
married and having sex.
Single and having
Oh,
sex.
okay.
Like I think
So when you have sex, you're not thinking right. I was like,
hold
Simon was worried, bro.
shoot you there.
I just like it's like a fire, right? Where it's like in its proper context, it heats up the home, it gives light, has so many different functions and uses. But in its outside of its context, it's like a dangerous thing that can burn up your life. Like you can, be with the most toxic person, but because of the sexual connection and the oneness that you're making with that person, without the covenant and the commitment that comes outside of the marriage, you are setting yourself to be bound to a person, enslaved to that person, with no commitment, with no mutual values, with no Christ in the middle. And it's scary to me sometimes to think. And I think what kept me like being single, if I were to be honest, wasn't so much like, man, like God, I really want to honor you and all these things, but learning and understanding like, oh man, like if I were to sleep with this person, not only is my witness like hurt, but I'm bound to this person. Like I'm connected to this person, and it's a scary thought. Like like let alone STDs, like pregnancy, all of that. Just the emotional.
Can I say something? I was actually having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this, and she gave such a great response, and she was like, a lot of the times when we have this conversation about sex for singles, it's fear driven. So you don't want to get pregnant, do you? You don't want to catch STD, do you? But never do we propose the biblical, like the gospel-centered reasoning. You know what I mean? Like
they didn't know about STDs back then.
Yeah.
It's like, what is this itching?
Yo, oh man, why does it burn when I pee? No, just
Holy fire.
But yeah, let's talk, because I know everybody, not maybe everybody, but most people tuning into this podcast, or us even sitting here and having this conversation, we've heard that. Like, even people that are non-believers will say celibacy is a good thing because it helps you think clearly about who you want to be with. You know what I mean? But like, what's the gospel-centered response to why celibacy before marriage is not just the right thing, not just the holy thing, but the thing that's life-giving? And I think sometimes we think, like when I think about sex and the parameters around sex, I'm thinking God's trying to rob me of my joy. I'm thinking God's trying to take from me, but really he's trying to add to my life. He's trying to protect me. And why is that? Like, what is the purpose of sex within a marriage? Like, why has God designed sex? Maybe before we get into the purpose, we could be like, we can even be honest and be like, I don't know. Like, I didn't even know that was the thing. Yeah, Parker, you had a thought?
Yeah, I was talking to a friend about this a couple days ago, and we were talking about like the benefit of having boundaries in even like a dating relationship. And this is somewhat loosely connected.
Yeah.
But just like part of abstinence isn't just like we shouldn't do this because of X, Y, Z, but it's also a response to who God is. I think Sam alluded to this a little bit earlier. Having an understanding of who God is, why he created things this way, and just like how gracious he is to even like give us these things. And I remember you've talked about this before, like we don't have to like taste food the way that we do. It could just be something we just eat and like get energy from, but we get to like enjoy colors and sound and music and all these things. And I think that part of why it's part of why the correct response is to just abstain is just like it's a response. It's like, I love you so much, God, that like I want to do my best to honor you in this way. And I think that like once you have that understanding, like there is an element of like I shouldn't do this, but it also becomes like I love my mom so much, I'm not gonna like steal from my mom because like that's my mom. Like I love her, I care about her, and because like out of that love, like there are things I wouldn't do, but because I love her, like that motivates my action to not do something, and also to do not just the bare minimum, but how can I show my love even more than just not doing something? You know what I mean? So I think that's part of it.
It's a response.
Abstinence is worship also.
Yeah.
Hey, say that again.
Abstinence is worship also.
Sorry, say that again. One time for the camera.
Say it again.
It's not just sex. Abstinence is worship, a form of worship as well.
Hey, make that a quote. Put it on Instagram.
Yeah, period.
Sam, you guys
Merch
something
coming
to say?
soon?
Merch. You already know. Put that on a t-shirt.
Abstinence is worship.
Hey.
And I don't think you get to like fully experience it if it's outside of marriage. Like there's fear, there's, pregnancy, whatever, like there's all of that. And so like how can I, like, at least for me, like how can I enjoy it when I'm thinking about that and not actually enjoying what I'm doing, So it's like there's that too. It's like a huge part of it.
Like it's scary because you're giving the most intimate part of yourself to someone that isn't giving you all of themselves.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you're giving, like not just for women, like for men as well. Like it's something that's so treasured. Like your sex, your body, your spirit, your mind. Like when we talk about this one flesh, it's not just the two body parts joining together. I mean, sex isn't just sex. Like I think our culture, we like to like just make it, it's just like it's purely physical. No, it's not. Like, and I think science, psychology, all these people are like figuring out for something that the body's the body of Christ, the church has been saying, because this is the same, like you were saying, alluding to the sermon, the same topic that Paul was talking in Corinth. Like, man, I love that like the Corinthians are considered God's people because they're one of the most messed up churches. If you just study their background sexually, like there were dudes in the church that at night, when their wives weren't doing it for them, they would go and sleep with prostitutes. And they thought it was completely okay because they had a philosophy in their mind of God is spiritual and I worship him spiritually. Right. My body is merely physical, so I can do whatever I want with my body. And like this is the mantra of our culture. Right. It's my body. I can do whatever I want to do with it. I'll take it upon myself. And like they're literally, Paul quotes and he says like, they have this saying like, food is for the body and the body is for food. And then they use that to also justify and say like, man, sex is a purely physical pleasure, so the body is designed for sex, so why shouldn't I give myself to my desires? And Paul says, no, your body isn't for sex. Your body is not your own. Your body is the Lord's. So your body does not belong to you. It belongs to the Lord. Yeah. And he says this at the end, but it's not just that your body belongs to the Lord, but the Lord is also for your body. Because, man, when you read like eschatology, I think a lot of times we have this view of like the end times as, we're just going to be like spiritual people floating up in clouds. No, we have a new body. Yeah. Like God he didn't just invest into the body when he created Adam and that was it in terms of physical investments. He's like, we're going to get a new body. And this new body is going to be full of perfection. So God isn't just for the soul, for your spirit. God is also for your body, for your flourishing. And because he designed it, he knows the attachments. He knows how the body works. He knows how it breeds into the longevity of your marriage when you've kept yourself. Like it breeds into all of these things. And he's like, the body is for the Lord, but man, God is for your body. That's like, he's not like we've been saying, he's not depriving you. He's like, man, like this is how you flourish. Planted here, man, your marriage, your children, your families, it all flourishes here. Planted over here, I still have redemption for you, but that is not where you flourish.
Right, that's good. That's one of my favorite parts is the Lord is for your body, because again, this speaks to this idea that God is for you. If he designed it, if he's created you with these desires, don't you think that he has a plan for these desires, right? Like, don't you think he has a purpose for these desires? We, a couple of years ago at Paradigm Church, we went through a sermon series called Cuffing Season, and at that point in time, we had a lot of singles. God's changing that. People getting cuffed up, getting married, having babies.
Some people now, I don't know about everything.
That's a shot at me. But we went through the book 7 Myths of Singleness by Sam Alberry. And in one of the chapters, he breaks down sexuality and sex in a way that I have never heard before. Like, just so profound. And I want to read a quote from that chapter from that book that talks about some of the purposes of sex drives and how God is for your body. He says this, whether we are married or single in this life, sexual desire is our inbuilt homing instinct for the divine, a kind of navigation aid showing us the way home. You can think of it as a form of body language. Our bodies talk to us about a greater reality of fulfillment and eternal blessing and urge us to get there. So what sex does, speaking to the purpose, is it unites the man and the woman and they become one. When they become one, they reflect God, because God, distinct three persons, is one. And, we've talked about this before. Why? When the Bible says, God looked at Adam and said, it's not good for man to be alone. Was it because he was lonely? Was it because he was insecure? He needed help with the assignment? Was it, what are all some of the reasons why, like, God told him, like, yo, it's not good for man to be alone? And I love the theology behind all this. God said, Adam, it's not good for you to be alone because you alone cannot properly and adequately reflect my nature.
Yeah.
He needed a partner so that we could see God on display. In order to understand the way God loves God, we needed a spouse. In order to see how God serves God, we needed a spouse. And so what brings the two and makes them one, it's sex. That's what brings them together. And Sam Albury in the book is talking about this reality that God gives us a sex drive to prepare us. It's like this inbuilt navigation system. It's a direction. It's pointing us to this reality that one day, because fast forward to the New Testament, Ephesians 5, the Bible teaches us that we are the bride of Christ. The body of Christ is the bride of Christ. And one day the two will become one. God will be with his people and we will be with him, right? He will wipe every tear away from our eyes, this reality that we will be married. The church is the bride of Christ. And so what our eternal glory is looking like our sex drive is pointing us to this eternal glory that we will receive. And so when we get married and we have sex, one of the things that God is doing is he's preparing us for the ultimate wedding, which is like the bride of Christ becoming one with Christ. And when you think about it that way, for me, it did a couple of things. One, it freed me from the shame that comes with having a sex drive, because now I look at it as a, again, inbuilt navigation system. When you feel horny, it's like, oh, my body's telling me I want to be one with someone. Oh yeah, the church is going to be one with Christ one day. And so now, instead of having shame around my sex drive, I can anticipate a greater wedding than one that we experience here on this side of eternity. And so I mean, we can break down all the different purposes of having sex drive, but for me, that has been instrumental in how I process sex drive, because I'm not just anticipating a wife. My body's telling me I'm anticipating Christ. And that's the greater reality that we get to live in.
Also, it's telling you that you're healthy. So, like, if you don't have that, you have to go seek medical attention. So, you're healthy.
So you're
Congrats.
healthy. Everything's working fine?
Yes.
Yeah. That's real. So have you had a thought on that? Or?
About the purpose of sex and marriage,
Yeah,
actually. I'm good on that department.
Speak.
So, stop. So sex outside the parameters of marriage is dangerous, but sex in marriage is so beautiful. And this is something I'm learning about, and something we talked about at Perazim's panel discussion. Sex is so sacred, and it's, for me, I've been learning it's a type of worship I can only participate in only with Yosef, it's not something I can do by myself. It's a different type of worship. It's something designed just for me and Yosef only, and my marriage. And it's so it's beautiful because it's not just physical, it's spiritual, it's psychological. There's a lot that goes into it. And it's at times when it's for intimacy, of course, it's for oneness. And it's something, eventually, something that produces life, like a whole human being. A human being that has maybe some parts of me, some parts of him, a human being that glorifies God, an image of God. But I've seen what it does for me, as, in the marriage, how I'm so vulnerable, the intimacy and the bond that it gives us. I'm so vulnerable. open to show my emotions, my sensitivity. I open up. I'm just so close to him, you know? Yeah.
Not getting too graphic.
That's it.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick?
Yes, please.
Just to kind of piggy out, you're right what she was saying. You know, one thing that like from the context of marriage that I learned about sex, practically speaking. So when we talk about horniness, like I think a lot of times it's self-gratification, right? Like you're about my desires, my fulfillment, me being like my needs being met. And when you get into marriage, like you realize like, yo, sex isn't even about you, right? Like when you understand sex as a means of service and giving like service to the other person, that like I don't go into this like, all right, I mean, how messed up would it be like, all right, my needs are met, like do whatever you want to do. It's like that's a messed up like sex life. But when you go
We
in,
got to talk about that too, because a lot of women's needs aren't being met. So here,
another podcast, right? Yeah.
Salim, are your needs being met?
Blink twice.
Let me know.
No, I mean, but yeah, like seriously though, like, you know, like that was a huge revelation for me. Like, it's like, oh wow, like it isn't about me. Like I'm going into the bedroom, I'm going into it's just like as an extension of worship. When you worship is so much more glorifying to God when you remove yourself from the picture, right? But if you're like, I feel you, Lord, I love the goosebumps, it feels amazing. Like your worship, it stays onto a Sunday service. But when you understand worship is an extension of my work, my life, like, you know, everything that I do, then, yo, it transitions and affects every area of your life. So that's so in marriage. When you like understand sex is not me meeting my own gratification, but gratifying the needs of another, it's so much, you know what I mean? The Bible verse, like, it's better to give than receive, right? That works perfectly in the marriage context as well.
You know what's crazy? Just real quick, I know Sam, you had a thought we'll get to in a second, but as I'm hearing you guys talk about sex, it just, I've heard somebody once say this, when you're single, what the enemy tries to do is get you to have sex, and then when you're married, he gets you not to try. The temptation is to make you not have sex, and that's like, it's so crazy. Like with us, we're like, oh, I can't wait, and the enemy pries on that, and he manipulates that, and he goes to town with that. But then, you know, from conversations I've had with married people, the very same act, sex, the devil will use to split people apart, to create a chasm, to create problems, and now he's using sex not to distract you from celibacy, but he's distracting you
from intimacy.
There it is.
I was like, I had to jump on that real quick.
Yeah, more experience.
Yeah, we were playing basketball this morning, and none of us can dunk, but there were alley oops.
Yeah, Samra, you had a thought though.
Yeah, and I have a question. So
Yeah.
like something you said, you were like not by myself, and that made me think of like, how does like masturbation fit into this? Like, is it a sin in marriage? Or, I mean,
Yeah,
I don't even know who.
topic.
Thanks for watching this episode of Shaping the
Yeah, I know Judah Smith had his response to this, and Ruslan killed him on his
as he
response.
often does.
Yeah, do you guys have a thought on that?
I'm not married, so I can't speak to this.
Is it a sin?
Oh my goodness.
Is this too real for you?
Well, it does speak to, like, you know, what does it look like to be horny and holy?
Yeah.
In the context of marriage.
I think like just like the way that we defined horniness in the beginning, it's controlling your thoughts.
Yeah.
I think in, you know, the marriage's bed is undefiled, right? And so like if your thoughts are of your wife, but again, I think a lot of masturbation, it can go both ways. I'm kind of torn because it can be towards just self-gratification, and it defeats the whole purpose of the marriage and the sex because you're not being one with that person. But at the same time, I think in certain scenarios and situations, like I can see like where, oh, if you're traveling a lot, you're not seeing each other that often, and you're like, man, like I want to gratify like, you know, myself for my wife. But I think it gets into, are you idolizing her then? And you're like making her out to be an object rather than a person. It's a difficult conversation.
It is tough because sex isn't just a physical act.
Yeah.
We talked
Yeah.
about. And so, yeah, what is it? How does the spirituality come into play? How does the emotion, the soul, you know, marriage and sex is the mingling of souls, right? It's the two becoming one. And when you're doing it by yourself, how can the two become one?
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Paul talked about like right after like the Corinthians passage where he was talking about like the husband's body doesn't belong to himself, it belongs to his wife, and the wife's body doesn't belong to herself, it belongs to her husband. And so in situations where you're masturbating, you're like taking your body back for yourself instead of as an act of service for your wife. And so I think, you know, it's hard to just draw like a black line and say like, nope, it's a sin or not. And I think in areas of sex within the marriage, I think there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of gray areas, and I think there's a lot of wisdom that needs to go into this. Like people who, you know, the wife isn't able to have sex for an extended period of time, like, or they're separated for many years. I don't know. Like it's a difficult like nuance, yeah.
And then you know, here at Shaping the Culture, what we're going to do is engage in the nuance, you know, because there is no easy answer. But I think this speaks to even a greater conversation, and I want to hear from the singles before hopping into the married folks. I don't know about you guys, but in the church, it almost seems like self-control is only for the single person when it comes to expressing your sexuality. But like self-control is also a necessity within marriage. And I didn't realize that till I got some married friends around me, because you think as a single person, oh, I'm single, I just got to hold out till I'm married. And if I can have self-control until the I do's, then it's free game. And whenever, however, all of that good stuff. And then you start realizing, yeah, to Yoseph's point, oh, traveling, sickness, illness, pregnancy. There's a lot of different things that play into life, and you can't always have sex. So self-control. But yeah, speak to that. Have you guys as single people, as us single people, have you guys ever felt like, oh man, I just got to hold off till marriage? Or what does your pursuit of self-control look like as you wait to get married?
Well, it's not easy, because as a single person, you do want to get married, you do want to have sex, but at the same time, in your singleness, you have to also realize, yo, how can I maximize my singleness for the glory of God? When you idolize, you know, sex, or you know, your satisfaction being met in that way, I don't know, for me, I just like the book we read, like The Purpose of Singleness. He said something about a lot of us, we idolize marriage and we despise singleness because we don't see the reality of what goes into marriage. In marriage, there's certain things, like he says, like he can't just do whatever he wants, and she can't do whatever she wants.
Right. Worldly problems, bro.
Right? Like, in the same way, like in my singleness, I have to help myself get there. You know, when I get married, it's not about me.
Right.
It's not about what I have to say always.
Right.
Just having the understanding now, so I can prepare myself best for my wife when I get there.
Right.
It's not easy, because you want to have sex, you want to enjoy these things, but like what helps me like stay self-disciplined and control my sex drive is like ultimately when I get there, I'll do it the best of my abilities.
And I think like that transfers over, because I think like from conversations I've had with married folks, like just because you then get married doesn't mean it's like all the time.
For
so
real.
I think if you're practicing self-control, serving somebody else, all right, I want to do this, but God help me to submit in this way. I think that when you get in marriage and your wife's like, nah, not tonight, I'm going through this, my parents are going through such and such, and there's a 7 week period where like, there's nothing going on, but you've already built up that practice. Like, y'all got something to say?
Like the question was towards singles, but they're talking a lot about marriage over there.
I mean, but yeah, so I think that like the two go hand in hand. So I think like what we practice like in our singleness, like that plays a large role into like when we get into a relationship or into marriage. Because if I'm just so used to just feeling my own desires, and that gets met with somebody else, like there's gonna be a lot of friction. If I'm just used to like I'm doing me, I don't care what anybody else says. I'm thinking about myself, whatever. I know that for myself, like I can be a selfish person sometimes. So then like when somebody else presents their desires and they're like, what about me? It can sometimes take a minute, because if I'm used to like, what about you? You know what I mean? Like that becomes a problem. Like, that becomes a point of tension.
I think that's what like really helped me. The book actually really shaped how I viewed sex in singleness, like how we should stay away from it, like abstinence, but what sex looks like in marriage. So that gave me a reality of like what to expect. So I can prepare myself best now. And that really changed my life. Like before then I was like, yo, when I get married,
it's on.
We getting on every day, all day, 24. Whenever
All day.
Whatever.
Like, you know, like, yo, because like culture tells you, yo, you can have sex however you want, whenever you want, like a phone call away, you know, a text away, you know,
An app away.
A swipe
and
away.
a swipe away, you know. So like for me, it's just like understanding, yo, it's not always about me. And I had made it like that for the longest until I read that book. I was like, yo, marriage is not about me. It's about us. It's about serving one another and reflecting Christ. So that has really shaped my understanding of what sex looks like in marriage. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bishop.
I'm gonna shift real quick, and then we can bring it back. I think in addition to that, like seeing the weight that like the Bible puts on marriage, that like married folks put on marriage. So like I use this example a lot, but like Yoni and Liz, like, so I would go to our small group at their house. Like it's one thing to like see the cute pictures and the announcements for like the pregnancies and stuff. It's another thing when I go over there when like he has work that he has to get done. Liz is upset. One of the kids is sick. There's dishes in the sink. Another baby got to get changed. Another one. It's just like there's a lot going on, and all those things are cool. But like that's not the stuff that we see on social media. And people, even when they present it, it's like it's not always cute. It's like no, it's deeper than that. It's like yo, like
It's ugly.
You know,
It's
for real,
ugly,
like,
yeah.
and it was to the point where it was like I wasn't scared to get married, but it was like it gave such a sobering perspective to know like yo, this is like a real commitment because if you're really about it. On days like that, that's where he's like, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not ending this. I'm here like until tomorrow when it's a good day, or if it's not a good day. If it's like this the rest of our lives, I'm committed to this. And like having that perspective, I was like, yeah, it's kind of a lot. You know what I'm saying? Not that I'm afraid of it, but I think like having that understanding of it, in addition to sex and knowing that like, yo, it's not just about the sex. It's about like when you have the sex, when she gets pregnant, when the baby's here, and then having to
just understanding like there's work on both sides. Like you know, it's not greener on the other side. It's greener where you water it. You know, so are you watering your singleness or are you watering the marriage? Like that's where you enjoy it.
Literally, like each aspect has its own difficulty. And I think a conversation we've had too is like, is it harder to be single or to be married? That conversation,
we had a whole
could
debate.
go like any type of way, but I think the reality of it is that like there's challenges on both sides. So like you can't just travel because you have somebody you have to check in with. You're married, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like I can just kind of pick up and leave, but like when it's cold and rainy outside, I might not have somebody I can like go home to. I'm by myself.
So warm me up right now.
Lonely.
I'm trying to be the little spoon. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, shout out to the little spoons. But yeah, so I think like the reality of it is like, is one harder than another? Sure, but it might depend on the relationship, different aspects, whatever. But like both sides of it have like their own challenges that are really challenging for that person in the season that they're in.
Parker, bro, whoever you end up with, they're about to be a tablespoon. Forget a little spoon, bro.
Tablespoon.
Teaspoon.
That was
bro.
good. That was good.
No, but can we speak to like I don't know how like deep y'all want to get. I'm asking this question in light of some of the intimate conversations we have. So if y'all don't want to go there, you can just edit this out. But you talking about how marriages work. Nobody talks about how sex that serves both parties is work. And I feel like if you're going into sex only thinking about your own desires, of course you go in, do what you want to do, get out, you have a good time.
Get in,
but but again, if you're trying to reflect this heart of serving our spouse, nobody talks about what it looks like to serve your spouse in sex. That and it takes work to serve your spouse. In sex, right? But when you think about sex, you don't think work. Maybe positions and stuff like that, but like nobody actually thinks about what does she want? What does he want?
Even you're thinking about positions you like. You know, you're not even thinking about what positions does she like.
I don't know how deep y'all want to get, but
can
you speak to that?
You trying to get monetized, right?
But yeah, sex is work, not just marriage.
I mean, just from the guy's perspective, like one thing that you don't really think about is foreplay. Like I don't think foreplay is as big. I mean, like you enjoy it, but how much it matters more to the woman, warming her up. And and a lot of like married sex, like it starts off like earlier in the day, like how you speak to her. Huh? Like text
Like the morning text.
You know, you're putting it in an oven, you're warming it up. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole day process in terms of like just preparation. And then even just like while you're in the act of it as well, it's things like that you would rather just get straight to it and, you know, have your own satisfaction out of it. But knowing, okay, sometimes like sex is work because there's parts of it that I'm doing for her that I might not be fully invested into, but I enjoy because she's enjoying it. You know what I mean? So it's like this place of like, oh, I'm working, but like this, if I was just being selfish, this is not what I would be doing right now. Like I wouldn't be lighting candles and, you know, getting the room ready.
We gotta get the candles, the music.
I'm trying to go to bed.
Put
You know
us
what I
in
mean?
game,
Like, quick,
come on.
yeah. But it's yeah. I think when Sam was talking, like the thought that I had was, I'm glad that God calls this gift self-control and not just self-denial. I think when you define it as self-control, you're controlling it towards healthier avenues of service rather than just suppressing something and denying its existence. And so as a married person, controlling isn't just merely, oh, no, don't think about that, push that down, suppress it, deny it, like, you know, don't live authentically. It's, man, spend like, or gear this towards and guide it towards something of healthy. So like, as you're single, like you have all this time, all these advantages, use that self-control instead of constantly dwelling in like the weight and like the desire and the lust and the flesh. Like use the opportunities of singleness just to serve the Lord. Like work out, start a business, get financially ready. Like, you know, like invest in yourself so that you are the person that you want to end up with in the future. You know what I mean? Like characters and values that you can invest towards that. Man, like once you get married, you're not just hoping, man, my wife's gonna be a prize, but you know that you're a prize. Like you're putting something into it. And then if we want to transition into like marriage and how self-control is like,
before you get on that, hold that thought,
sure.
because like I think you just brought up something essential as we're talking about sex being work and it's a service. You know, one of the ways in which you can prepare yourself for sex, I think our culture has a fascination with positions and, you know, size and all of that thing. We'll just be real. I think what we need to prepare ourselves is like, how well do you serve your neighbor? How well do you serve your church? Like, if you want a great sex life, you got to look at the way you serve those around you, because it's a muscle that you're practicing, right? It's a heart posture. Before it's a playlist, it's a heart posture. Before you light a candle, it's a heart posture, right? Before you like the game is on point, it's a heart posture to even get you to that. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough. Like, if we're gonna go into sex with this heart posture of how can I serve this person, then what other areas in your life do you serve others, right? Like, how could you serve your spouse all the days of your life if you don't even know how to serve people you see once a week?
You know, one thing you see biblically is like a good measure of like the quality of a husband or a wife is you pay attention to how well do they serve people. Like, I think why Rebecca is so prized in the Bible of like this example of a godly woman is like how she was serving Abraham's servant before she was even offered as a wife. Like this virtue of this is who she is without you, Isaac. This is the the value that she brings in. And so even as single people dating and desiring a spouse, like, yo, if you want to know what your sex life is gonna look like, it's not oh man, I gotta taste the ice cream before I buy the cow. You know, like this mentality of like,
Somebody's like, hold up, wait a minute.
You know, like, people in our culture, they're like, oh, like, man, I gotta know the
drive the
sex is
car.
gonna be good. I gotta test this out. Like, but it's like, no, sex just gets better with time and practice. Like, regardless of who you're with, like, the more that you do something, the more practice you put into it, it gets better. There's hope, right? Like, but
There's hope.
there's hope, yeah. Like, I think as like we're like, oh man, I'm a virgin. Like, I'm gonna mess up the first night. Like, you will, and it's okay. You know, like your honeymoon doesn't have to be like a porno or like this like huge like thing of you know what I mean. Like it's something that you grow into, that you enjoy, that you get better at. But I think one way that you can tell like what they're going to bring into the bedroom is the character that they bring into the bedroom as well. You study that and like, oh, they're really good at serving people. That means they're going to be good at serving me, like, you know. And there's so much more to just the physical, sexual aspect.
Sammy's got a thought.
And like I have two things. Okay. And to add to that, like you're learning how like however you're pleasing her, like it wasn't the same that you pleased other women in your life, you know? Like you had to learn her and how she feels, you know, how she feels good or whatever. And so like it takes a lot of work to like
You have to know your neighbor to love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so good job.
You said you said two, yeah.
Yeah, too. Like I think it's more for you. Like in the church, or I think a lot of women are I'll just speak for myself. There's a lot of guilt, you know, with having sexual thoughts or even just surrounding that. So like once you're married, it doesn't just automatically go away. So like how do you like did you struggle with that? Like if you ever had any guilt or whatever surrounding that?
Okay, so is it the shame, feeling
guilt,
shame for
right.
having a sexual appetite
Like
prior to
when you were
marriage?
like when you were single,
Yeah.
and then how was it in the context of like marriage? Like you're like not like right now.
Yeah.
Like at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. It's something I actually forgot to bring up with the first question, horny and holy, how we answer that as a woman and the background that we come from. The background I come from is Ethiopian, very conservative culture. It's very shameful to even have a sexual desire.
This whole podcast is shameful.
It's
The
a
whole
sin.
podcast-
You're about to get canceled.
Yes, I'm hoping certain people in my life do not see this
I'm about to
podcast.
send this to your father.
He cool actually.
Oh, yeah, pops, okay.
But yeah, the group of friends I had, the friend group I had, we talked about sex. We had those desires, and we were the group of girls that had it probably a little more than the other friends. We talked about it, and I definitely felt shame and guilt for having that growing up in the church, because it wasn't something that was addressed or we even learned about. It was very shameful, not just the culture, but the conversation in the church. It's not brought up at all. But the friends I had outside church, we definitely had those conversations. There were some friends that had, the experiences, but we drooled hearing about those conversations. Okay, yeah. I had to learn that it was okay, and I think it was. Getting close to being married to Yosef and the premarital counseling that we were having, the books that we were reading that helped. But in my in my time of singleness, it wasn't something that I found help for, to be honest. And I definitely felt shame for it. But it's not something I feel right now at all. It's something I think it's very appreciated in my marriage. I'm not always like that at all. There's moments and there's seasons. But it's it's something I'm thankful for. I don't know. Does that answer the question though?
She's flustered over here.
Yeah, here. But I actually wanted to. You might have to edit this out.
Yeah, like from the guy's perspective, I think I always thought I remember even we would debate this man, once I get married, I'm not gonna have any more problems with lust and attraction. Man, why? Because I have a healthy avenue. I can always have it from my wife. So this appetite is being satisfied. So why would I ever struggle with this? Marriage is the end all for lust and sexual temptation. But I think in one aspect it can be a little bit more difficult, because when you're single, you're allowed to look, you're allowed to to entertain certain thoughts with some parameters, obviously, but you're allowed to you meet a girl and you're thinking, oh, what would it look like with the relationship with her? You have these fantasies, you play certain thoughts out, and it's perfectly okay. You're pursuing this woman, you're interested, but when you're married, a lot of that door is closed, you know, and so self-control looks more like those thoughts come up, I gotta quench that real quick.
Right.
I'm scrolling, I see something, I gotta kill that real quick. And so I think self-control looks different. You still need it, if not more, because now you're they're not options. You can't entertain those options because you have to be faithful, not just with your heart, but with your eyes, not just with your body, but with your mind. And so self-control in the context of marriage is, if you didn't have self-control when you were single, it's going to be so difficult to have self-control in the marriage, because it just gets harder. Yeah.
I've got a story about that. I actually I had a friend whose brother got a divorce because he cheated on his wife, and when he cheated on his wife, he moved in with my friend because his ex-wife kicked him out. Of course she would do that. And they went grocery shopping one day, and my friend told his older brother, oh, look, she's cute over there. Look at this, and his brother just spazzed on him. He's like, don't do that. Don't you know that's what cost me my marriage? just a little look here, a little look there. It was innocent at first, but all these little looks add up, and eventually you find yourself in a bed with another woman. But like to your point, like I have married friends who literally deleted Instagram because they're like, I don't even want to flirt with this temptation. You know what I mean? But yeah, like it just because as single people, it's innocent for us. She's an option. He's an option. Oh, like maybe this will turn into something, and we under that guise we pursue whatever. And so I think it's important to be mindful of the small things because you never know. Everything big started small. Nothing starts off big. And so if we're not being intentional, even for us as single people, I think we could take too much liberty in the name of singleness, in the name of like looking for potential mate or what have you, or spouse. But yeah, let's even being mindful of like what it is that we're actually seeking out so that we don't set ourselves up for failure once we do get married.
And I think just even the danger of always having options. I think that's one of like the reasons why like so many people are struggling to even just settle down, because availability and options and the entertainment of also like I think this generation, like we're going through something so much more difficult because back then you met and married people that you grew up within miles of, you know, and now you have options internationally. You can fly people out, you can fly there, like your scope is like now millions of people that you can filter through. And so I think it's just so much harder if you're even in your singleness, like constantly like, okay, this person has this, but then but this person has, and then like you're you know how like when you have so many options, you get confused. I think it's just generationally like we're like confused, you know, because we have too many options and we don't know
Horny,
the art.
holy, and confused.
We don't know. We don't know the art of what it looks like to make the best out of situations. Like I think we're so much trying to find the best instead of cultivating the best. And
You know, there was this analogy that I heard. There was a kid, and his parents took him to like a candy shop, and his dad told him, "Hey, you can have one candy." But the kid had so many options. He was looking at like M&M. He was so many candy that he was like, I can't pick one. And sometimes with singleness, that's how we are. We have so many options that we can't even decide on one. As a result, we stay single. But that just to pick it back off. Yeah, I almost forgot how to say pick it back off, bro.
even to that point, I think it's not always like the physical options we have available to us. It's the idea of, oh, there could be something better. So I think that like when you see something wrong, so I know for myself, like there might have been a time where I was talking to a young lady, you know what I'm saying? And then a conversation might take a turn. Or, why are you laughing? Just things might not go as well as they were at the beginning. I'm like, oh, there could be something better. And it's that, like, there might just be something else. So should I put in the work or should I just call it? Because there's probably somebody better out there who could do such and such. You know what I'm saying?
We use Christian lingo in the Christian culture.
Oh
it's
my
like,
gosh,
oh,
it's the
God
worst.
has got something for us for me. You know.
Listen, and like I think like it can become toxic when you say like, oh, what's God's will? Because I think like this is a longer conversation, but I think there's like. So this is how I think of it, right? And if I'm wrong, please rebuke me. You can send an email to shapingtheculture@.
Ebenezer Indris
Yeah,
at
literally. His
gmail.com.
number is 651.
Hey,
relax. Yeah, I think that like, so how I see it is that like there's being in God's will, right? Like submitting to Him consistently. I also think that there's also a grace in that where I go, God is also with me, because I think that there's a grace where if I'm just completely wrong, if I'm open to it, I can be corrected.
Yeah.
But also like just God's kind of got us wherever we go. So it's a matter of like being God's will, but also just making a decision.
Yeah.
So I think like when we say like, oh, is this God's will or is it not? Yes, that's a good question to have, but also like, yo, just make the decision.
Yeah.
So if something isn't working out in a relationship and you're saying, oh, is this God's will? Yeah, that's a possibility. Or you could just have to like put in some more work and learn how
It's
to be more
funny because
patient.
we don't even like include God's will in any other decision.
You know what I'm
I mean?
saying?
Like, it's like we have people out here talking about, oh, what's God's will in terms of like their relationships, but like where are you seeking God's will in your day-to-day life? Like were you asking God for His will when you were trying to eat, like when you were asking, you were going shopping, what you were going to do for the day? Like let's be consistent, you know?
What your major is.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sam, you had a thought?
Why like there's such a huge like choosing your spouse is such a big decision. That's why there's like we can't just marry anybody, you know.
Yeah,
That's true.
but
So-
kind of like with what Ebenezer was saying was, it's starts off in the small things, right? Like, so one analogy that I always love when you've used was the story of Saul. Saul was obeying his parents and go find a lost donkey, right? And it's like, okay, he was obeying the revealed will of God, where honor your father and mother. And then as he was obeying the revealed will of God in that day to day, he was led to the sovereign will of God, where he's looking for donkeys and he runs into Samuel and he gets anointed king. You know what I mean? And so what I mean by like, follow, like, be consistent in that you're seeking God's will in your day to day life, and that will lead you to the spouse, the job, the career, the purpose, all these big decisions. Like, no, he cares more about the details, because if he doesn't have your character, like, what if God did give you the spouse of your dreams? If you don't have the character to keep them, it's like almost unhealthy for you. It would be a curse. So the very thing that God is intending to bless you with, you don't have the character for, turns into a curse. You know what I mean? And so that's why it's so important in your singleness to have that character of like seeking God's will, so that when you go into the relationship and the marriage, like, you know how to handle what God's will looks like, because you've been doing it every day.
If you're able to do that with your sex drive in singleness, you could do that in your sex drive in marriage. Because just because you're married don't mean that you're not tempted by so-and-so or, it's just, but starting in my singleness, I was honoring God with my heart. I was perfecting my character. I was learning to trust in God. I was learning to keep my eyes fixed on the things that are from above. And I had positioned myself to not only set myself up to marry someone, but I set myself up to keep someone as I was married.
And I think that's the fight of your life, right? Like, to stay married. Like, it's a whole, because like, it's not just, I got them now, I'm done working. It's keep them how you got them. So it's like, that's another fight. That's another work. That's another day of laboring. And so if you're not used to that, like, mindset, you're not going to put in the work that's necessary.
Yeah.
Parker, you had a thought?
Yeah. So to touch on what Sammy said, I know we're wrapping up too, and this might bring it back around full circle. How you said, like, marriage is such a big decision. I think that it is. I do think sometimes in Christian culture we make that the decision, and I think that, like, we make like, oh, I'm horny, so if I just say pure until marriage, if I can just get married, then that's it. It's like
Purity culture that ruined
you know
us
what I'm
too.
saying? So I think, like, that's not the goal. Like, the goal is to pursue, like, the Lord with everything you have, and if you happen to meet somebody that can keep up with your pace along the way, like, praise God. But I think, like, to what you were saying earlier, like, the sexual desires that we have, that's not just, that means I got to get married. Like, we all have that, you know what I'm saying? But it's to remind us that, like, hey, we have a higher calling, and we're called as believers to be united with someone, like, who's that much greater.
Right. Yeah. That's a word. Yep. Y'all were dropping gems all over the place. I want to, before we wrap up, and really, like, I feel bad we're even closing on this note, because everybody here said something that we could have just spent the whole time talking about and unpacking. But because we don't have time for that, we didn't get into that. But I just wanted to give an opportunity for everybody to say their last piece, something that maybe they wanted to clarify, maybe dive deeper into. Maybe it's a new thought that you want to leave us with to be encouraged or challenged, inspired, whatever it is. But yeah, whatever thoughts that you guys have as it pertains to horniness and holiness.
I mean, I would just kind of recommend one book that really has, like, helped me a lot in understanding marriage is The Meaning of Marriage by Tim Keller. And one thing that he said that was, like, so profound, like, we've talked about, like, a lot of lofty concepts in terms of, like, spirituality, like, marriage and all these different things. But I think the way he starts off the book is even just practical, because a lot of times, like, we have a view of marriage like, it's 50-50. Like, and a lot of times, like, even within the church, we get criticized, like, like, even in the church, like, the odds of a marriage working out is 50-50. And he breaks that myth. And he's like, he actually breaks down the statistics. Like, the reason why the church is divorcing at the same rate as the world is because the church is living like the world. We just call ourselves Christian. But he's like, he broke it down. He's like, if a couple waits to have sex before marriage, their odds of staying married and having a healthy marriage goes up to like 80-85%. If a couple is not living together before they decide to get married, their odds go up. Like, there's just so much.
They get married after college, and if they stay married for 5 years longer than they've, because sometimes you get married, you're like, I'm unhappy.
Yeah.
He said if you waited out for 5 years, you're the most happiest you'll ever be. So like even the 50-50, like when you really break it down, it really isn't.
If they're
50-50.
actually following what the Bible is talking about, not just getting married, but all the elements that go into marriage, like your odds of success, like it goes up to like 80-85%, right, in the book. And it's just like,
and that's empirical evidence.
Like that's
not,
statistics. But like because people in the church are living together, they are sleeping before they get married, like they're causing detriment upon themselves, but then they're blaming God for why the marriage didn't work out. And so, there's so much to add, but I think that was a big part. Like wisdom is proved right by the results, by the actions, by her children,
which is the result.
Yeah, and I think wisdom is all right. Like, why do I have to learn from my own mistakes? Like, the point of the Bible is not just these stories. Like the story of David scares me. The story of Samson scares me. Like all these different examples, and even just people that you see within our context, within our culture. Like, why would I end up where they are? Like, and so we have to live differently. And so the Bible is offering a different solution. And as young people, we rise up to the challenge instead of saying like, no, I want to learn by my own results. Like that's foolishness. And so, like the Lord's way is the proven way. And let's try to follow that and live up to that standard instead of trying to define a standard for ourselves.
That's good. Sally, you want to follow up to that?
Sure, yeah. What I want to say, very short actually, it's okay to be horny. It's okay to have a sexual appetite. It's healthy. And instead of suppressing it, take it to God, really. Take it to God. Take it to your mentors. Let that start a conversation in how to practice it and how that can be turned into worship. Whether it's in abstinence or in marriage, knowing in what parameters you're able to exercise it. It shouldn't be suppressed. The culture I come from, the background I come from, in how I was as a single person, I didn't really have a lot of resources or people that can guide me in how to understand myself even. So suppressing it does not help at all. Bring it out there. Take it to your mentors and friends to talk about it.
That's good.
All right. I have two things to say. Like this topic can be like really sensitive to a lot of people. Yeah. And there's sexual abuse and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so like find your area where you need to heal this conversation surrounding sex, what it looks like, what does a healthy sex look like in marriage and things like that. I do have a book recommendation. It's called Rethinking Sexuality, God's Design and Why It Matters. It's a really good book. There's a lot of like personal experiences in that book. So yeah, I would say like heal first, because you can't really take that you can take it into marriage and process it together, but I think it would be helpful to like figure that out in your singleness and just
That's good. Thank you.
My message would be encouraged, family. Be encouraged that, having a sex drive is not a sin. Be encouraged that when you apply it in the right way, it's a beautiful gift God has given us. And it's an opportunity for us to see God more glorious when we use it the right way. A suggestion I have for single people is read the 7 Myths of Singleness. That has really encouraged me. That has really gave me new perspective on what singleness looks like and what to expect in marriage. Because for the longest, I had the highlight of marriage, but not the reality of marriage. So I was going into this mindset that when I get into marriage, this is what I will what it would look like. But the reality is like y'all said, it's work. It's like, man, I'm like serving. I'm laying my life down. That's what I'm signing up to do, And your singleness, the Bible says die to yourself. But in marriage, you're not only dying to yourself, but you're dying for your spouse. So it's just like understanding that and preparing myself. Like when I get there, I want to be able to serve my spouse to the best of my ability. In order to do that, I got to start now. And the book has helped me get there. And it is helping me get there. And also read your Bible, more than these books, read your Bible. The Holy Spirit will enlighten you. He will give you the word, the knowledge, the wisdom that you need to apply the sex drive in the right way.
My God.
That would be
He said
my
forget
message.
Joseph and Samury's recommendation. Just he
Forget
said
about-
read
I'll
the
tell you
Bible.
what you need to read.
My recommendations are supplementary. I wholeheartedly agree with Sam.
Parker.
Yeah, I would say. So something that I've learned just in my brief time on this planet that God has allowed me to have. I think two things. One, know that there are consequences to your actions. So I think for me, it's easy to, when you have an understanding of grace, there can still be a way that I've abused it. Like, I get it, it'll be fine, but God will forgive me. Like, that's true, but there are also consequences to your actions. And my dad and I were having a conversation about people point to people in the Bible who are in the Hall of Faith, like, it's okay, like, people have messed up and all that, and I think that's absolutely true. So David slept with Bathsheba, and he's still a mighty man of God. He also lost a child. He also had to, like, bear that. And I imagine, like, things that I've gone through, like, what did David think about, like, after he won a battle, after he went at home, and he was like, man, I wish I wouldn't have done X, Y, Z. But there's also grace. And that mistakes that I have made, mistakes that we all make, like, God accounts for those things. He knows that those things are going to happen, and he also uses those things so that, like, as you grow, as you become healthier, as you learn, as you have proper perspective, like, all of those things contribute to glorifying him, even if it's like teaching somebody else, speaking from your experiences, even though, like, you might walk with a little bit of a limp, that's a testament that, like, you're also healed and, like,
Amen.
it's, like, worked in your life.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's
Thank-
powerful.
Samson was in the Hall of Faith, but I mean, he died. You know what I mean?
You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, bro. Like,
Because of his consequence. That was the consequence.
Exactly.
you had that faith for a reason.
Chaos in David's household.
Yeah, we don't talk about that. Yeah, I mean, God's grace saves us. It doesn't save us from consequence, you know? And so consequences are reality. But yeah, I would love to add to all of this. I mean, you guys gave great insights, and it was a pleasure having you guys on the podcast and having this conversation. Let us know in the comment section if you want to have a part 2. But I would say, yeah, there's freedom in being horny, knowing that it's God's design, but he's put parameters around that. And I hope we, in our conversation, gave you just a little bit more truth, a little bit more clarity on what to do when you have sex drives, and how inherently they're not wrong, but it points us to a greater picture, a greater reality that God has for us. And so, yeah, and let's normalize this conversation. I was thinking about what Salim was saying. She's like, she had to talk to friends outside the church to get an understanding of what it is. It's such a shame, you know, it shouldn't be so. I hope Shaping the Culture, Parisian Church, we get to bring these conversations to the light more often, not because it's a trendy topic or a hot topic or controversial or it's a clickbait, but really because in my life and in the life of those around me and the conversations I'm having with people are struggling in silence, and people are trying to figure this thing out. And if we claim to have some solutions, some answers, why not share that, you know? I think we're really good on championing the gospel, but not the implications of the gospel. And I think that there's a lot of implications as it pertains to our sexuality within the gospel. And so I hope this episode blessed y'all. I hope it encouraged y'all. Until next time, family, peace, and grace.
Touching the meal like this ain't clout. This isn't real life. I got a real life. Price is better and it ain't no doubt. I ain't got time to debate. There's countries to save. Afghanistan, Cuba, I pray.